This house in London, the Red House, it's about, the lecture is called Buildings and Their Territories, which is, I'll explain through images. This is a new house in a particular context. This microphone's falling to pieces. Actually, I don't know what I'm going to say after that lecture. It's this architecture that I make treats other architecture as a source of knowledge. So you'll see other architectures in the work that I do, like this staircase. And at the back of the house, there's a garden room, a dining room, which extends into the garden. And then the garden is very exotic. So you come in from the city, and very quickly you find yourself in a rather miraculous place. And on the first floor is a large room, 6 meters by 13 meters, for the art collection of the owner. And it has a curving ceiling, which you can just about see. At the back, that room looks out over the garden, and there's the dining room. But at the front, you can see that bay window is a place in which to sit and see the city. And on the roof, there's bedrooms and a bathroom, which is very quiet. I mean, you can be up there and not know you're in the city, and then outside it is this courtyard where you see you are in the city. In Copenhagen, we made this building here on the right, which completed an empty lot in a development which started in 1781, and we finished it with a building which is an apartment building which takes its rhythms from the Beaux-Arts building that is in the square, but talks about it in a different way. And this is what it's like. It has balconies here. And this square, which began as a classically ideal square, bit by bit has become humanized as people live in it. So the work that we're doing here, the house that we're making here, this apartment building, is not about the intentions of the classical plan, but rather about what the classical plan has become through human action. And when you're in that building, you really are in the city, looking at the church and the figures on the top. In Warsaw, we made an embassy for the British government, and it's this. If you make an embassy, you ask yourself what the imagery should be. And interestingly, all governments choose architects of merit and then let them do their work. And the embassy's meaning is the creativity of the country. But for us, it was important to understand what that imagery might be. And so there's a particular condition here. You can see that it's a double facade. I'll just go back. In Warsaw, you get very low temperatures in the winter and very high in the summer. So it's a very simple double facade. It's ventilated in the summer and closed in the winter. And the outside is reflective, reflects nature. The inside is much more solid. It's a bomb-proof facade. And the shape of the building gives two roof gardens for people to have meetings. And then inside the building, that facade we saw is there. There are internal gardens as well. And so it's very quiet, very calm interior. And then the entrance inside is it's a porte cochere, and at night it's rather romantic. In fact, the building isn't lit except for the lights inside it and lights on the trees. But if you come in as an ambassador, you drive your car into this garage here. But if you come to get a visa, In all embassies, you are always sent around the back of the building, and it's a very unpleasant experience. And we thought we could do better here. We thought that people coming for visas could come through this secure but glass route and see all of the front of the embassy, enjoy the gardens, and then go around the back and find an entrance which was just as dignified as the entrance on the front. So you have a more democratic arrangement. Currently we're making a building in Deinze in Belgium, and just to explain it, that's the building. This is the church, and then this is the river. And it's in two parts. It has a council chamber on the front where you can see the council at work in the night and in the day. And then at the back is a block. It's an office block for city officials. And each of those buildings has a shaded loggia. So it's a low energy building. You keep the sun off it. It has ground source heat and natural ventilation. And it's, the stone we're using is interestingly the same stone as that Fretton Architects used here in Milan, which Gennaro has just told me is all falling off, so we'll see what happens here. And these renderings will show the inside. That's the entrance hall. This is the cafe, and you can see from inside that you see the city, but most interestingly, this rendering of the council chamber shows how closely the politicians will have to feel to the city, and how closely the people in the city will feel to the politicians. And then the office spaces are very simple. They have concrete ceilings, natural ventilation, a little bit of air through the floor, ground source heat. It's very low energy. And these are some construction photographs of it now. It's under construction, just to give you an impression of how it's turning out. So it's an experiment with the kind of materials that you regularly use in Belgium. What can you do with these rather conventional materials? What can you say with them? In Denmark, again, we made a museum, this museum, in an island called Lolland, which is 2.5 hours south of Copenhagen. And this photograph shows the location before the building, and it's very, very unique. It's very Danish. The sun is very low angle. It's a mixture of farm buildings and other buildings. And if you look back, you can see a manor house here and then a barn. So it really is in a former farmyard. And this is the manor house with an English garden behind it and a moat in front. But the most interesting part of the project, we thought, when we saw it, is this view of the land. Because when you come to this place, you drive for hours through flat countryside, very flat countryside. And the building is located in that flat countryside. And this countryside has been made, it's been created by people over hundreds of years. So it's not just a piece of land, it's a huge cultural artifact. So when you approach the building, you see first that land, and then you see the entrance, and then as you get closer, you get more intimately connected. Then there's a cafe, and then at the back of the cafe is an apple orchard. So the view that orientates you is taken away and then brought back here, and that occurs throughout the whole of the plan of the building. And the galleries are arranged around a long gallery here with the view at the end. And over this side is an adaptable gallery. All of these galleries can be daylit, are daylit, but the light can be altered so it can be dark like this. And at the other end of that range is a slightly different type of gallery space. And this is, in a way, this isn't a policy about art spaces that I have, an attitude, which is that the gallery space, the architectural space of the gallery should be a background. It should allow you to see the paintings. But as a background, it should be skillful. It should slightly change in its light color. It should slightly change from room to room, so it stimulates the periphery of your vision while you look at the paintings. On the other side of that corridor is a completely different type of room, specifically for these Golden Age paintings, and it has a roof light here, which is one of those rotated roof lights that you would have seen when I showed the elevation. And these spaces are joined together so that individual viewers can avoid large groups that are going through the gallery and being given a lecture. So there are a number of ways that you can personalize the space through the choices of how you walk through it. At the end of that range is a space for sculpture, which is not light sensitive, and so it can have a view. And then leaving that room, you go into the corridor and see this room at the end, which is only intended to sit in. They never show art in it. And that's what you do. You look at the landscape. In between looking at the paintings, you have time out just to sit and look at the landscape. And as you walk away from it toward the water, toward the coast, you see that this building is as abstract as the farm building. And abstraction isn't something just of modernism, it's characteristic of building over a long time. In London, we just finished this restaurant here in front of the Tower of London. And it directly engages with the architecture of the Tower of London. Along this riverside walk, which is hugely touristic, there are two types of building. There's one which is the ticket office that's in a high-tech style and says it has nothing to do with the Tower of London. And then there are smaller buildings which sell food along the water edge, which are garden sheds which say that they're invisible and they don't matter. And our point was to make a building which directly engaged with the forms of the Tower of London. And it does that partly by being made of wood, which, like this stone, is a natural color, a natural material, and painted to look similar. But these forms here are repeated upside down in this form here. And it's in three parts. Although it's one restaurant, it's in three parts, with these two parts connecting under Tower Bridge. And this is an outside place to sit and eat. And so the building has, its forms display themselves as you walk past it. So it has some animation. And then inside it's very romantic. You can sit and see Tower Bridge. On the other side you can see the Tower of London. You're very close to the Tower of London. And then this is it, and that's the shard that was shown earlier. But this space here, this metalwork, talks to that metalwork of the bridge in a rather unconscious way and ties the whole thing together. In Amsterdam, we finished this building, which is a loft building, where the owners of the people who rent it have formed their own interiors, and so it has, on the south side, it has lots of balconies, so that wherever you divide the space, you always have a balcony. And there are moments where things like this happen, and I was very interested in the architecture of Chicago at the turn of the 20th century, where you have very sober buildings, but which, as you look at them, have more and more incidents, more and more adventure, but on a very subtle way. And so let's go inside that building. When you come in, it's like this. And one thing I know from doing buildings is that you can be very simple because complexity naturally occurs. So, for example, here you get this adventure of the difference between the courtyard and the upper part, or moments where this supporting tree structure can be seen against Amsterdam, or where the penthouse reflects the city. But it's a community. This is very Dutch. Nobody has curtains at night. Everybody sees what they're doing. That community is sometimes of apartments which are like this. And here's an apartment by two young men who share the place, and this is their disco at night when they take the bed away. So it's full of craziness and Dutchness. There's a dentist, a Polish dentist, and then oops, I missed one. There's a dentist, and then there's a hairdresser. I missed a slide. But when you're in this building, you're in the city. Like the Copenhagen building, it's very much of an urban building, and it talks to the city. In Antwerp, we're just finishing two buildings. The site is over here, and this is a new building, a recent building by the Dutch practice Nuitling Redijk, and it's a museum. And our buildings will be here, I'll show you in a second, but that's the museum. And these are two buildings by Dina and Dina of Basel. And this is a CGI of the final development. So that's Dina and Dina's buildings. These are two buildings by Chipperfield, and then these are buildings by us. And the project was bought in the middle by a developer who dropped the budget. So you can see that David's buildings, which were much more opulent, have had their balconies all cut off. And now we're working in brick. So this is a challenge. What do you do with brick? Well, you make brick interesting by creating a vertical emphasis on one and a horizontal emphasis on the other. And like the Amsterdam building, this is a very plain building which has moments like this which occur very pragmatically and give the building interest. And these are the computer-generated images of the real estate agent, which shows the style of the building. And this is their image of it in the night. These are construction photographs of the building as it goes up. I mean, they've got there's no animation in them, and there's cover on the windows, so it doesn't show it as it would be. But this is the balcony, so that the corner balconies, let me show you, these corner balconies have terrific views toward the river, and yet have this sense of enclosure and room-like quality. And this is the scheme being struck by lightning, just to amuse you. I hope it does. In fact, it's Roger Dina's building being struck by lightning. And we just won a competition here in Switzerland in a very interesting location, a very dull town with a very spectacular waterfall. And so it's a tourist place, but the town itself looks like this. And these buildings will be removed to build the building that we're going to make. And it's very typical of a small Swiss town. It has a mixture of residential and industry. Over here you can begin to see that there are tall, rather elegant factory buildings. And we made a case that these buildings could be part of the composition. This is the idea sketch for the apartment building that we're making. It's a building which is an accumulation of parts which allows it to do certain things, which I'll show. And this is the image of the building. So by having this shape, we have 4 apartments that face over to the waterfall, and then 3 apartments per floor that face to the plaza here, but also have views off their balcony to the waterfall. And then a small building here, which is just a loft, we think. And that drops so that this existing building still sees south light. In Switzerland, that's important. It's very communitarian. You have to put your project to the city. It has to be voted on, so you have to be very careful of these things. And from the Antwerp towers, I'm beginning to make an architecture which is extremely plain, very obvious, where these are very vertical, this is very horizontal, and this vocabulary of forms is played out in different ways. But it gives you something, it gives you great pleasure. As I said in the Amsterdam building, you can start simply and you can get great results. And on the plaza there's a cafe, so it will really be urban, because a new station is being built here, so it really is part of the center of the town now. And you can see the plan here. It has 6 apartments around the core. The core has got daylight. And then the facades have a small vocabulary which is used in different ways. When it faces the waterfall, it's very reflective. Where it faces the city, it has solidity, and it's made of white concrete. The last project is very small. It's an addition to a language school, and it's It's an essay in Neo-Gothic, believe it or not, and it's an extension of this rather Victorian Gothic school. But so the front to the street looks like this, and then the back to the courtyard looks like this. So it's a real ironic combination of different styles. Front being brick, the back being rather Mesian, and on the top floor you can see that those two styles come together in a strange way and produce a space which is really quite unplaceable. Thank you very much.